right up front. Is that appropriate for you to call the president a liar? Is it appropriate for any of us to call the president of our country that?
You know what? These are important times. We're debating big, passionate issues. When your president goes on TV and says that he's going to have to start pulling Social Security on checks on August 3rd, he's not being truthful with the American people. So, you know, look, I'm tired of politicians all over the place who don't talk straight and just say what they believe. Let's cut through all the crud and try to solve issues here. Let's quit being political, and I think that's all this president's been doing.
You think the talk about Social Security was essentially a scare tactic?
Absolutely. We know, and this is what they began a few months ago when they began talking about this notion of default. We know there are plenty of government revenues to service your debt, to service our debt when August 2nd comes and goes, if it comes and goes. Same thing with Social Security checks. And my fear is that he's going to continue down this line and try to scare military families and try to scare families who have student loans and just continue to go down the line instead of getting serious with Republicans, rolling up his sleeve and doing something to change the way politicians from both parties in this town have been spending money for years.
Congressman, I want you to explain something to me, though. You just said a minute ago, we all know that they have this money. I don't know that, and I've been looking at this for days and days, listening to economists. I will grant you in a heartbeat, it's incredibly difficult to sort through all of this. I don't know in a definitive sense they don't have the money, but I don't know, as you're saying, that they do have the money. How do you know that?
Look, there are government revenues to service our debt for the rest of this fiscal year. There are government revenues to service Social Security checks, military benefits, all of that eventually. And none of us want to get to this point. Eventually, you will get to a point where government will run out of money. We don't want to get there. But they keep making this inference that come August 2nd, the lights in the country are going to go out. They're doing that to scare the American people. We can survive a week or two or three, and you know what? We have to try to get real structural reform in how this town spends money.
Okay, I think that's good clarity in the sense that I agree. It's not going to be like turning a switch when this happens, but you're not saying that there's some infinite pool out there that's going to work.
No, we know that. I'm just saying they point toward August 2nd as, and the president even said it, come August 3rd, I may have to pull Social Security checks. He knows that's not true. Now, 4, 6, 8 months down the road, we're going to reach a point where we have to do something. But nobody wants to get to that point.
So even when you hear the Bipartisan Policy Center came out and they said that the government is scheduled to pay out $307 billion in August, but will take in only $172 billion. You're saying despite those numbers, there's still some pad to work with for the moment while we sort this out.
Absolutely, and they know that. And so instead of trying to scare Republicans into doing something by August 2nd and indirectly scare the American people, they ought to just get really serious and let's come up with real strong reform so that we don't get to this place again.
All right, you're getting to the point that I want to get to now. The Tea Party and some other people who are very, very fiscally conservative right now are trying to take a hard line. That's your job. That's your important thing to do. I understand that. But what are you willing to compromise on? Because certainly we know in a country like this, nobody gets to have their whole way because there are 300 million of us here. Not everybody agrees.
No, I think what most of us freshmen who were sent to Washington believe we have to do is change structurally the way this town does business. And so it's less the size of the cuts. It's putting in place some sort of reform that will say we won't get here again. The first piece of legislation I've introduced as a congressman was a balanced budget amendment. It now is part of a real movement now in the House called Cut, Cap, and Balance, to get some cuts next year, to cap spending, but to formally amend the Constitution so that politicians from both parties can't spend more than they take in a year. I think that being able to achieve a real strong reform like that is something most American people really want. 80% of the American population supports a balanced budget amendment. The president should support it.
Do you think you have any real chance of getting there, though, in this kind of environment? Because I have to tell you, when any group in Washington, draws the line in the sand and says, by golly, this is not going to happen, very often talks stop. Nothing gets done. The very thing that makes people furious in this country happens. The government simply ceases to function.
No, I hear you, but and if it's a crude analogy, I apologize. The analogy I use with this president is, in a way, he's acted like a teenager whose parents left for the weekend. He had a big blowout party and trashed his house, and now he's stomping his feet because his little sister or the rest of us won't pick up after him. He has gone on a spending binge for 3 years. If the American people really liked what he'd done, I wouldn't be standing here. They wouldn't have sent us to Washington to stop what he's done.